A very good evening to all our viewers, and welcome to this Monday's edition of the Evening Review. My name is Toibon Jebela, your host. Let's look at some of the headlines in tomorrow's Namibian Sun. Tonight on the show, we are joined by Romaine Kakero. She is the youth focal person for the Trade Union Congress of Namibia, that is TUCNA, and she is here to talk to us about issues related to the 16 days activism against gender-based violence, and specifically how that relates to workers, Namibian workers in particular. Romaine, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Tell us what TUCNA has been busy with as far as this campaign is concerned.
TUCNA has been busy for a while now. Actually, we're having a project, an ongoing project, which will officially be launched next year.
Yeah.
We are running a competition for youth, the involvement of youth in the work environment and how they can contribute to a safer working environment. So this deals with different issues of gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace,
yeah,
and of course COVID-19 issues and pertaining to everything that involves gender-based violence specifically. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe give us a sense of what constitutes those violations that you just mentioned. I'm asking because there's always this meme that I see on social media where people say, "Oh, what is sexual harassment?" And then someone says, "If you are cute, it's flirting.
Yeah.
If you're ugly, it's harassment." I know that is a joke, but in the real world, really, what is it that constitutes that?
Actually, I would like to bring it to your attention that Namibia is actually one of the first African countries to rectify the ILO Convention. So this is the International Labour Organization Convention on gender-based violence and harassment specifically. So because of this, it was rectified, I believe, on the 9th of December 2020. And because of this, and of course pertaining to the Constitution of Namibia under Article 95,
yeah,
any convention that has been rectified then becomes the law.
Yes.
So according to this, the convention has a specific definition on what sexual harassment, or not basically sexual harassment, but rather gender-based violence and harassment is. And this is basically a harassment or an inappropriate approach to someone according to their sex or gender.
Yeah.
So this is not specifically men and women, but rather other people who identify as women or men, if you get what I mean. Of course, the LGBTQ community and all those people. So this defines, to an extent, what sexual harassment is and gender-based violence pertaining to those people specifically. Yeah,
but there is a very thin line also in some instances, Romaine, where, for example, a man genuinely likes a co-worker or vice versa, and we know many people that end up getting married and building families together. Where do I start? We are colleagues. I like you. I have all the good intentions.
Yeah.
How do I put across my thoughts without crossing the line of violation?
That then becomes, of course, a personal issue, and also it comes to the question of consent. If the person has consented, to what extent has this person consented? Because it's not always that someone sort of reacts in a flirtatious way to you that it actually means they're flirting with you.
Yeah.
So it's basically consent. Has the person consented? And we know we have expressed and tacit consent, but then the most important thing is expressed consent. Has the person told you that they're interested in you?
Yeah.
So it draws the line between many people and what they define as harassment. Some people find harassment as you talking to me is harassment, you touching me is harassment, whether you feel I have any attachments to you or have any feelings towards you. So it actually depends on the person's way of defining consent.
Yeah.
But then, of course, in a working environment, there's a certain way you need to conduct yourself.
Yeah.
And you would know what is beyond where you draw the line and where you're not supposed to cross.
Yeah. I'm asking this question because many, many years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I dealt with a case where a female member of the team came to my office and said there was one of her male colleagues, pursuing her.
Yeah.
She alerted me to it. I called in the guy, and the first question he asked me was, well, what's wrong with that? I like her, so am I not allowed to like someone and express my feelings towards them? Something like that. But I understand exactly what you're saying, to say, look, there ought to be still civility and boundaries in which such views are expressed. So I get your point, but tell me, why is it important for young people in particular, because they are the troublesome ones?
Yeah.
In a workplace, why is it important for them to be aware of these things?
I would actually like to correct you on that one. You shouldn't really quite characterize young people as the troublesome ones, and that is, I think, the problem with community nowadays. Yeah. A thing of looking down on young people. Because you're young, you need to be treated in a certain way. Because you're young, you need to be, you need to conduct yourself in a certain way. Yeah. Before anything, all of us are human beings. Yes. We should be respected as such. Yes. And I believe in a working environment, everyone has the capabilities to be there and have the certain necessities or whatever it is that they need for their specific jobs. So young people should specifically be worried more concerning gender-based violence, harassment, because they are the most vulnerable. Yes. Being that they are the ones that are more in a submissive position. And we've seen during the COVID times now specifically, there has been such an increase in gender-based violence and harassment. And also when we're speaking about young people, we're more pertaining to women and the younger female workers. Yeah. So they are the most vulnerable, and we see this in so many different ways, where they get intimidated, they're in hostile environments where different approaches are being taken on them, whether it's a comment or physical touches, which later can result into assault. Yeah. No, I get you. No, what I meant really when I said that they are troublesome ones, I just meant that I think proportionally the trouble around harassment is within that space. Of course, in the workplace, maybe it's a bit of balance there, because you have quite a fair representation. Not always.
But No, I hear you. But in general, I just meant that in general, now beyond the workplace, that young people, I suppose, through their social engagements, that's where you hear how certain incidents happen. So there are naughty people within that community, but it was not meant at all to...
Okay, naughty. It's actually the older people, but rather we're not really specifically talking about age groups now, because gender-based violence and harassment can happen to anyone. It can actually be an older lady that has been working in the company for many years, and they can be violated by someone else or a younger colleague. So it really doesn't matter about age, but I do understand what you mean by that. But rather, that is why we have company policies, we have employment contracts and things that define what a certain conduct is in a certain working environment. So such things are so important for everyone to be to have knowledge of them and to be able to use them in their daily interactions with their fellow colleagues.
There's also this common phenomenon where you hear that in some workplaces, for a young person, or for anyone, as a matter of fact, let's not just, again, like you said correctly, that we shouldn't confine it just to young people. But to say that for you to be promoted to a higher position, or for you to be considered for this or that incentive in the company, you have to give some sexual favors to your superiors and stuff like that. As a union, how often do you come across such incidences, and how do you address them?
This, of course, are occurring cases, but then it's actually very alarming that even though gender-based violence and harassment is on such a big scale, it is so underreported. Why? Because of denial. Some people feel that, the other party would deny it. They feel that they're being judged, or they feel that they're lying. So to an extent, it's more of an internal thing of like, this is what's happening, rather, and this is what the other person is saying. But there's actually no action taken, like, there's not an extensive actions that are taken in the labor courts concerning this specific things. And this is because most people rather feel like they're going to be judged, and because it's women, they're going to be like, you provoked it, you wear this certain dress at work, and you're looking for it. So these are the allegations generally in the public, and that is why most people don't even come up with this sexual harassment cases or gender-based violence and harassment specifically at work. So it's a really big issue that most people do not come forward, and this is because companies and the employers rather are not creating this environment where the people are comfortable enough to share these experiences with their colleagues or their bosses or whoever is in superior that is able to help them and rectify the perpetrators' actions.
What are the obligations of employers in this regard?
Obligations?
Yes, towards the victims, towards having a conducive environment that prevents those kind of things to happen.
Of course, there's so many ways you can tackle this, and because for many years now we have really not had a specific law that guides people on how to conduct themselves and how everything should be conducted. And that is why the ILO Convention, which was rectified by Namibia, is a very important document that I believe all employers should have, because it specifically sets out what conduct and what conduct constitutes gender-based violence, what conduct constitutes harassment and violence in the workplace. So this is something that every employer should look at. So more specifically, this is why, of course, the Labour Act will come in and how to conduct certain things, and, of course, company policies. So I think the appropriate way to try to fix this or try to manage this in the workplace is, of course, having discussions with the workers and actually teaching them on what conduct is too far. When do you cross the line when you do this, and what conversations are you allowed to have and not allowed to have? Because whatever you do out of the office is fine, but whatever you do in the office then implicates on whatever is being done in the productivity and everything that comes from it. So the way you conduct yourself with your colleagues and all these things. And of course, having discussions with your employees, what do you find offensive? And on both genders, what do you find offensive? What wouldn't you like for someone to do to you or someone to say to you that would constitute a sexual harassment or whatever it is that you feel you have been violated against? Yes.
Indeed. We go for a quick break, and then we return for the last segment of the show.
And what do you think about this one, babe?
Can we go now?
You're the best.
Can we go now?
Sweetie, we're just getting started.
1 second, babe. I'm on the phone. Yeah. What do you think about this one, babe? Babe? What were you saying?
short, no time for relaxing. Be the first in, last out, make it happen. Rise up.
We continue our conversation with Romaine Kakero. She is from the Trade Union Congress of Namibia, TUCNA, and we are talking about gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace. Romaine, maybe before you go into other things, how frequent are these cases? Is it a because I mean, for you as a union to embark on these activities is because you must have seen some seriousness of this. How often generally does it happen that people get harassed at work?
As I say, most of these cases are unreported, so we wouldn't, in a sense, have a definite figure.
Yes.
But then, of course, gender-based violence and harassment can occur every other 3 days at work, or even constantly if someone is actually persistently on it. But then we see in the news, of course, there's so many cases that are being reported, whether not even at the workplace, but even at the homes and all these things. So gender-based violence in general, in itself, is such a big thing. It's just that in the working class, or the working world rather, it is more constrained and it is not so vocally expressed because most people are scared to lose their jobs. They're scared to be perceived in a certain way and all these things, or be considered as troublesome. So in most cases, cases in the workplaces are actually not reported, but they are as often as I may say, even blink. Yes.
Yeah. And how then does that affect productivity in the workplace?
Women being the most affected by gender-based violence and harassment at work, of course their confidence is taken down by then. They're not able to venture out into empowering positions or be looking for other positions because they feel intimidated by whoever is harassing them. And productivity at work is also put down because most people, you need to enjoy work, and you need to be free and express yourself and bring about new ideas and actually enjoy work in itself. And these things are affected. Interactions between the different employees are also affected in the way they're interacting with each other, their work ethics and so many other things, and how they're able to deliver on time. Whatever work they're given is also affected because they're intimidated. So even if they're given a certain task to do, and they're given this task to do with this certain person, so you see that they hold themselves back from actually giving it their all and bringing the best out of themselves in whatever project that they have at work. Yes.
You spoke about the ILO sort of regulation, some of the new regulations that have come in place to guide these processes. And I don't know whether that provision speaks in detail as to what constitutes harassment. I know that you touched on it briefly earlier to say it's unwanted advances and stuff like that. But I'm just thinking with this, because there's always this evolving way of doing things, evolving definitions of things. What constitutes harassment today might not have considered the same offense 20 years ago, for example. Yes. And sometimes there's also an element of subjectivity. A person, there's just no agreement. There's no consensus between the two of us that this particular act constitutes that offense. Is it helpful to have clearly defined offenses to say if you do that, you have crossed the line, rather than leaving it out there for people to interpret?
I think it's very important that there is a definite definite definition on what it is, because as you mentioned earlier, you said that someone said, what's the problem with that? Or, you know, because for them, they feel that it's not a big deal, or that does not constitute violence or harassment. So there's a need to have a definite definition on what it is. And that is why the ILO convention is very important, because it sets out the ground and the framework on how people should conduct themselves in the working environment pertaining to violence and harassment specifically, and for the workplace to be a place of dignity and respect, and eventually creating a world free of violence and harassment in the workplace, of course, without consent. So it's very, very important that there are certain definitions, and that is how most people get away with it. In so many cases, because there is no definite definition. And that is why I believe the public should get a copy of the ILO convention. It's all over social media. You can get it on all, of course, on our TUCNA platform as well. It's also there. It's actually available to everyone. The employers and the public should have it for them to know what constitutes and what is the specific definition for sexual harassment, and because sexual harassment is included in the definition of gender-based violence and harassment.
Which brings me to my next question, and I suppose what you just said now speaks to this, to say, what is it that, what steps must be taken in the workplace to sort of contain incidences like this? I suppose one of the answers would be that is having that guideline, that ILO in place, and maybe working through your staff and say, look, colleagues, this is a new convention by this international organization, and whatever you do must not sort of, you know, violate these provisions here. But is there any other thing that you think must happen in terms of taking steps to create that conducive environment?
In creating a conducive environment, of course, there are so many steps that can be taken, and the public can also be involved in this, in that we're creating services that teach, that help victims, that help both victim and perpetrators to actually understand how do these people feel, and from what point are they coming from, so that when you're educating the people, you understand, because everyone is coming from somewhere. As we say, someone may be making an advance to a female colleague or whoever it is, but they have the mind of that they are also attracted to them, but the way they're coming off is not right. So of course, implementation of understanding masculinity and how it works and all these aspects, giving out, providing services, and also things like the conventions, international conventions and conferences, teaching on this specific topics. Things like legal action can also be taken, or legal sort of, legal action can be taken that teaches on how they can conduct themselves and what should be done, what should not be done. I think the most important thing is informing the people. People do not know, mostly people do not know how to conduct themselves, what constitutes this, and of course they're just the, I would say psychopaths, but then that just do their own things, but then, but then usually most people do not know, because they are of the intention that the feeling is mutual, or whatever it is that they're doing is mutual, and it is actually fine. So support groups, faith-based support groups, whatever it is, that people can get information on the specific gender-based violence acts and harassment, or whatever it is that they may be doing, and advances that they may be doing that actually affect productivity in the workplace, and all this gender-based violence actions, or actions, that they're taking towards the victims.
As a union, what is it that you are doing to then contribute towards that ideal environment that we want for workers? What kind of engagement, who are you talking to in this regard to create that environment?
The TUCNA has really been influential in the gender-based violence and harassment movement in general, because of course we have rectified the convention, and we've brought in place a policy that everyone can follow in order for them to ensure that the working environment is safe, and that there is actually everyone's dignity is uplifted and they're respected in whatever means that they're taking. So mostly, specifically, and I'm the focal person for youth, we are focusing on the youth. Of course, as we say, it's a cliche saying, but then the youth they are the leaders of the tomorrow, and I mean, they are the future, they are everything, and such a big powerhouse, actually. So those are the people that we want to impact, and how they can maneuver and how they can navigate in whatever it is that they're doing in their workplaces to bring about this conducive environment where they are in a safe and healthy working place where there's no gender-based violence and harassment. And that is why we have the ongoing competition that will be starting from next year. We'll be running from January to April, where basically we are asking the youth to send us a short clip showing us how they can contribute to a safer and healthier working environment in their workplaces. So it's a short clip of 3 to 5 minutes, and whatever it is that they're coming up with, whether it's in an animated form, whether it's in a documentary form, whatever educative clip that they're going to come up with, that will be able to teach the other people, basically telling their stories also of how whatever they're facing in their environments and how they can contribute to the safer and healthier workplace. And of course, there will be a prize to be won for that.
Yes. The final question then, Romaine, is how do you see Namibia in the foreseeable future insofar as this evil that is called GBV and harassment is concerned? I'm asking this question because these kind of interventions that you and others are involved in help a lot to evolve the thinking and the perception of things. The way we perceived things in the past through exposure has changed. Some of them have changed with time and exposure. What kind of Namibia do you see in the foreseeable future as far as things like this is concerned?
Namibia has moved so much from our old ways of thinking. Of course, there are so many things that need to be rectified and that we are fighting for specifically, but then when it comes to the future is really bright when it comes to issues like this. Why? Because more people are coming up, more people are talking about these things, and that's the most important thing, that when you come out, and that is the importance of trade unions specifically, because it creates an environment where everyone comes together and is able to fight one common enemy in saying that, okay, you have a problem at work, let me take your hand, there's someone else that's here with you, and we're going to fight this, and we're going to look for a bargaining way in order for us to maneuver around this environment. So it's going to be a bright future because we're going to be able to collectively fight evils like this and set out laws in which people can be held accountable for whatever actions that they're taking.
Indeed.
Yes.
Romaine, thank you very much for your time. We hope that we wish you actually the energy to continue with this work and also for your programs that are lined up for the new year, including that competition that you spoke about. So thank you for making time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sure. That is Romaine Kakero. She is from TUCNA, speaking to us about issues of GBV and harassment, sexual harassment in the workplace. Thank you for watching.